Life is simple, so simple that we miss it. In fact, that's the problem. We miss it because we're too busy trying to live it. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic, as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. That is where the unraveling begins. Life is simple until you try to make it more than it is. Until you try to capture it, control it, own it, define it. That's when the trouble starts. That's when you stop living and start chasing. And the moment you start chasing life, you lose it. And in the first few moments of existence, when you were born, you didn't try to be. You just were. You breathed. You moved. You existed in effortless presence. But over time, you were taught that life is a problem to solve, a ladder to climb, a puzzle to decode. And now, here you are watching, listening, thinking, trying to figure it all out. Maybe you're hoping that something in this video will finally give you the answer. But what if the answer isn't something you get? What if it's something you let go of?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This is the paradox that Alan Watts lived in and taught with poetic clarity. Life is not a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. And the moment we turn it into a goal, a task, a status update, we begin to suffer. Because we've stepped out of the flow and into the illusion that we are separate from it. We imagine ourselves as isolated egos, navigating a world of objects, chasing happiness like a prize at the end of a game we never agreed to play. And Watts would ask, why? Why do we do this? Why do we make life complicated when it's not? The answer, in part, is fear. We fear that if we stop trying, we'll fall behind. That if we let go, we'll lose control. That if we don't take life seriously, we'll waste it. But here's the deeper question. What are we really afraid of? Are we afraid of death? Of insignificance? Or are we afraid of realizing that all this effort, all this striving, all this becoming might just be unnecessary? Watts reminds us that the whole idea of self-improvement is a kind of trap. He said, trying to improve yourself is like trying to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. But the very act of trying to improve the self assumes that there's a self separate from what it's trying to change. But what if there isn't? What if the you you're trying to fix is just a mental construct, an image, made of memories, fears, desires, and not a real, separate entity at all? What if the self is just a story we tell, and then forget that we're the ones telling it? This is where Watts takes us into deep philosophical waters. He pulls us away from the surface-level pursuit of answers and invites us into the mystery of being. He tells us, stop trying to figure life out. You just be it. Just dance with it. Because the moment you try to grasp the rhythm, you trip. But when you let go, when you surrender to the music, you become the dance. And in that moment, life is no longer something you're doing. It's something you are. But let's pause. What does this mean practically? It sounds beautiful, poetic, floaty even, but how do we actually live this? How do we stop making life complicated when everything around us is pushing complexity, more goals, more content, more pressure, more noise? Watts would say, start by noticing. Notice the impulse to control. Notice how quickly you label things good, bad, success, failure. Notice how much of your day is spent in mental commentary, rather than direct experience. And then, when you notice it, don't fight it. Just see it. Because awareness is not about force, it's about clarity. And clarity leads to freedom. Because when you see that your thoughts are just clouds passing through the sky of your awareness, you stop identifying with every storm. You stop chasing every rainbow. You realize that you are not the weather, you are the sky. And the sky doesn't need to do anything to be what it is. It just is. That's the simplicity Watt speaks of, and that deep, effortless presence that's always available but rarely accessed because we're too busy trying to be somewhere we're not. Let me ask you something radical. What if nothing was wrong with your life right now? Not because it's perfect, but because it doesn't need to be. What if the real problem isn't your circumstances, but your belief that something is missing? And what if that belief is the very thing keeping you from experiencing the peace you're chasing? Watts often compared life to music. But, he said, we thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage, which had a serious purpose at the end. The thing was to get to that end success, or whatever it is. Maybe heaven after you're dead. But we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or dance while the music was being played. That's not just a metaphor. That's a blueprint for how to live. Because when you treat life like music, you stop rushing to the end. You stop treating every note as a means to the next. You start hearing the beauty in the now. And that's where simplicity lives. Not in having less or doing less, but in needing less. In realizing that the moment you stop trying to make life something it's not, it reveals itself in its full beauty. And all of it, the pain, the joy, the silence, the mess, is part of the song. But here's where it gets even deeper. Watts would say that the real confusion begins when you do this one thing: you separate yourself from life. You create the illusion that there's a you observing life, and then there's life happening out there. That duality is the root of suffering. Because now you're not being life, you're thinking about it. You're analyzing it, judging it, comparing it. And in doing so, you miss it. Like a person at a concert who spends the whole show recording with their phone, never actually hearing the music. So how do you stop doing this? How do you stop separating yourself from life? Watts would say, realize that you are it. You are not a visitor in the universe. You are not a stranger in your own body. You are not a mind trapped in a skull, staring out at a hostile world. You are the universe, experiencing itself in human form. You are the wave that forgot it's part of the ocean. And the moment you remember that, truly remember it, you return to simplicity. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped resisting what is. This is the turning point. This is when you stop living according to the logic of fear. What do I need to fix, achieve, earn, and start living in the logic of love, where you're not trying to get somewhere, but simply being where you are, where every moment is enough because you are enough in it. That's not laziness. That's not passivity. That's presence. And presence is the most powerful force in the world. So let me leave you with this question. What if you stopped trying to improve your life and started experiencing it instead? What if the simplicity you're seeking isn't something you create, but something you uncover by removing the layers of thought, fear, and striving that have buried it? What if life is already whole, already beautiful, already complete, and the only thing missing is your willingness to surrender to it. This is not an idea. This is not a theory. This is an invitation to stop, to breathe, to listen, to live not as a project, but as a presence. Because life is simple until you try to make it more than it is. We spend most of our lives chasing the future, believing that somewhere beyond the horizon will finally become what we're meant to be. That once we get the job, the relationship, the money, the peace, the enlightenment, then we'll be complete. But Alan Watts would lean in, smile and say, "You're already it." And just like that, the entire framework of striving collapses. Because what if the very idea of becoming is the illusion? What if the moment we start chasing something beyond ourselves, we forget that what we seek is not in front of us, but within us? This is the great cosmic joke, one that most of us live and die without ever getting. We run from moment to moment, obsessed with progress, with self-improvement, with fixing what we believe is broken. But what if nothing is broken? What if the very act of running is the thing keeping us from arriving? Watts would say that the ego, the I that thinks it's separate from the world, is a game we play with ourselves. It's a necessary illusion, like a mask in a play. But the tragedy is that we forget we're wearing it. We take the mask to be our face, and then we suffer because we believe that this limited, anxious, striving self is all we are. But who were you before you learned your name? Who were you before you were told what to want, who to be, how to measure your worth? That's the real you, not the one trying to become something, but the one already being. And once you remember that, you begin to see through the illusion of becoming. You begin to realize that you're not on your way to anything. You're not a project. You're not a problem to solve. You're a process, a happening, a dance. And the second you stop trying to become, you start being. And in that being, you find everything you thought you had to chase. But this realization is terrifying to the ego, because the ego needs to become. It needs a story. It needs a future. Without it, it feels like death. And in a way, it is. The ego thrives on separation, on the idea that you are here and happiness is over there. But when you see that there is no distance between you and life, the ego loses its grip. And for a moment, everything becomes still. Not because the world stopped moving, but because you did. You stopped running. You stopped becoming. And in that stillness, you see clearly you've been what you were looking for all along. This is the heart of Alan Watts' teaching, not just that life is simple, but that you are life. That there is no separate self pulling the strings, no homunculus inside your brain directing the show. There is only this moment, this awareness, this dance of sensation and thought and presence. And when you stop trying to stand outside of it, when you stop trying to control it, you become one with it. And in that unity there is peace. But let's not mistake this for passivity. Watts was not saying, do nothing. He was saying, stop doing from the wrong place. Stop doing from fear, from lack, from the illusion that you need to become something in order to be whole. Instead, act from presence. Create from love. Move because it feels like dancing, not because you're trying to win a race. That's the shift. Not from action to inaction, but from doing to being. From striving to flowing. And it changes everything, not because the world changes, but because you do. Suddenly, you're not anxious about the future. because you realize the future is just a concept. It doesn't exist. It's a projection of the mind. The only thing that's real is now, and now is always enough until you think it isn't. That's the moment simplicity turns into suffering, when you believe that now needs to be more than it is. More successful, more spiritual, more something. But Watts would laugh and say, that's just the mind playing its old game again. And the moment you see it, you're free. So here's the deeper question. What if your greatest act of courage isn't to accomplish more, but to let go of the need to accomplish anything at all? What if the highest wisdom isn't found in climbing the ladder, but in stepping off it entirely? Not because you're giving up, but because you finally realize there is no ladder. There never was. There's only this, only now, only life, happening effortlessly when you stop trying to force it into a shape. Imagine what would change if you lived this way. If you stopped measuring yourself, if you stopped comparing, if you stopped narrating your life as a before and after story of becoming. You'd stop asking, am I enough yet? And start seeing that you were never not enough. You'd stop seeking meaning and start being meaning. Because you don't find meaning in life, you realize it. It's not hidden. It's not waiting. It's here. It's this breath, this beat, this moment. And that's the irony. The more you try to grasp life, the more it slips through your fingers. But the moment you let go, it floods in, not as a concept, but as reality, as presence, as the quiet realization that you are not a separate observer of life, you are life, observing itself. And in that realization, the old story dissolves. The story of the self who must become, but the story of the seeker. The story of the struggler. Gone. What's left? Just this. Just you. Just now. And it's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. So the next time you find yourself striving, running, measuring, comparing, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what am I really chasing? What do I think I'll finally feel when I get there? And is it possible that I could feel that now without anything changing? That's not a trick. That's a doorway. And if you walk through it, you'll discover what Watts spent his life trying to show us, that life is not serious, not linear, not a problem. It's a play, a performance, a spontaneous unfolding of patterns and colors and sounds. And you are not the audience. You're not even the actor. You're the dance itself. So live, not as a seeker, but as a song, not as a problem solver, but as a presence. Not as someone trying to become, but as someone who finally remembered they've always been. Because life is simple until you try to be more than it. But once you stop, once you return to the center, once you let go, you realize that you are life. And that's where the simplicity begins again.